Okay, look at 10.2.21. This is also related to other problems. We're going to actually run a hypothesis test for proportion. First, you want to check that the conditions are met, and so that's what that first part is, where your n, your p, your 1 minus p are equal to, and then you want to make sure that that is greater than or equal to 10. So it is. Sample size is less than 5% of the population. Sample size here is 700. And we're assuming the population is kind of the United States population, which of course 700 would be less than 5%. And then what do we know about the sample? Let's look at those conditions real quick. So what we know about running a hypothesis for a population proportion, here's this from the book and from notes we have here, is we know that here are those conditions that we're trying to meet. And so that's what allows you to answer the question. From there, in this class, you can do these things by hand, but again, we're going to use the p-value approach, and we'll use StatCrunch to do this. And so the next step is to calculate this test statistic using that equation, and you get a p-value. And then, of course, after you, so let's go ahead and do that real quick. And so here's the null and alternative hypothesis for this situation. The null is the proportion equals 57%. Do parents feel differently? And that would be that the p is not equal to 0.57%. And so now we're going to calculate the test statistic and find the p-value. And so to do that, we're going to do stat proportion stats one sample. We're only looking at one sample of values. We have the summary statistics. We know from this problem that 264 out of 700 is our sample data. That's our evidence. We're going to run a hypothesis test. I think it was 0.57. Double check. 0.57. And that's all you would do, compute. And then within that, you would get your test statistic and your p-value. This test statistic is negative 10.3. The p-value is so small that they don't even put it. It's just less than 0.001. And so in this case, you have your test statistic here and your p-value. So I get negative 10.31, negative 10.31, and the p-value basically 0, so small. It's at 0.0001, and so 0 there. And so in this case, since the p is low, we reject the null. And so in this case, as the p-value is less than alpha, which is 0.05 over here, we reject the null hypothesis and conclude that there's sufficient evidence. There's sufficient evidence that the parents feel differently